What's going on, everyone? Jeremy here from the Quartering, and the reviews, the user reviews, are starting to come in for The Last of Us 2, and fortunately, the journalists are there to protect it. Now, the first copy, the first game of The Last of Us sold 17 million copies, and that was as of April 2018. I think the game came over 2000 and came out 2013, and over 20 million by October of 2019. So over 20 million copies sold for The Last of Us Part 1. The question that is on everyone's mind right now is, will it outsell the original? It seems highly likely that in 7 years, those 20 million people will want to be or will be interested in a sequel, in spite of a lot of the controversy. I've talked about how there is still a positive effect to, the leaks and all of everything going on around it, just because people are now more aware of The Last of Us 2. Also understand that The Last of Us 2 is coming out at a time in which much of the country continues to be under lockdown. So why not play that new hot video game? On Twitch, there's over 360,000 people watching it right now. Will those people turn into purchasers? I don't know. I don't see watching a game and then buying it afterwards, but that's just me. At least a story game. If it's a multiplayer game or something like that, that I totally understand. But I wouldn't want the story spoiled to me. That's just how I am. I didn't watch anybody playing Red Dead Redemption 2 or anything like that. However, we know that The Last of Us was overwhelmingly positively reviewed by critics. 94 critics giving it a 95%. 91 out of 94 reviews being overwhelmingly positive. Interestingly enough, 91 plus 3 is 94. Oh yeah, this does add. I was seeing this 95 here and confusing it. So there's something like 40, 100 out of 100 scores, which is, of course, ridiculous. Now, as of midnight last night, public reviews have finally been opened. And those are the only reviews I really care about. And to be honest with you, the only reviews that really influence my buying decisions are Steam reviews from verified purchasers. Metacritic is compromised. It has several times in the past taken part in deleting certain numbers of consumer reviews. If we look back at The Last of Us, just like regular The Last of Us, or even remastered, we can look at that. It had 9,200 total reviews, user reviews, with a 9.1 user score. Right now, The Last of Us Part 2 has 9,641. So it has, the game, if you got it at midnight, you couldn't have even finished it yet, has 9,641 reviews. So obviously, some people are leaving reviews about the game. Maybe they haven't played it all the way through yet. Maybe they haven't even played it. But if we look at it, my position is this. If the Sony PlayStation Store allows for 7,000 5-star reviews on a game that has only been pre-ordered by people, then we must also take into account the reviews of people that maybe haven't completed the game yet. So what journalists do, and we're going to get to that in a minute, is journalists always like to use the word review brigade. Oh, it was review brigaded. So discount the negative scores. Even though, just like we saw with The Last Jedi and we saw with Captain Marvel, these controversial titles are often review brigaded with 10 out of 10s too. Those are fine. It's just the reviews that are 0 or 1s that are bad. You know what I mean? You can see this review contains spoilers, which I won't read. 4. Honestly, the quote, "it's an SJW game" isn't even the reason everyone is so upset. It's that Naughty Dog ruined such a beloved character and created a terrible story in the process that makes the game unbearable to even finish. The only good thing about the game is the graphics, but I wouldn't even say that's a compliment because we already expected them to be good. Just stick with the first game. 1 out of 10. 3 out of 10. It breaks my heart to write this, but I really did not expect such a poor story after all these years of waiting. While there were a few genuinely good moments, majority of the game filled up with plot holes, and it took elements of what worked for the first game without understanding what made them compelling. It seems like this game would be done by another studio, but it's not. Now, a lot of these people who are likely reviewing the game had made up their mind, based on the argument that people leaving the review now couldn't possibly know what the game is about or what's in the game is absurd. The entire game has essentially been leaked out by now. Any review in here could very easily access the entire story and watch it in just a few hours. So you have Neil tries to be Hideo Kojima, but his attempt fails big time with an awful story. The graphics and gameplay is great, but those things don't make up for the awful story decisions. And it's a 4, right? It's not like the person gave it. It's not like the person said, here's how I can tell if it's a fake review, right? If they just said like, yeah, the graphic and gameplay is good, but the story's terrible, 0 out of 10. That's an emotional review. You have to give it some points for the graphics and gameplay, which they did. You could say this. Here's a 0. The game is not bad because of SJWs. The game has poor contrived writing that is trying to prove a point. It's forced and unconvincing. In addition, you have gameplay from 2013 and NPCs that speed up and slow down like Grand Theft Auto 5 in 2013. I mean, these seem like reasonable critiques, right? Disappointing follow-up filled with inconsistencies, disrespect, and a general lack of logic in decision-making. Despite the possibility of experiencing sensible, realistic, and above all, interesting journeys with new and returning characters, the developers decide to show mostly dry garbage in your face and force you to grudgingly eat it for hours on end. I mean, these are not bot reviews. These are definitely people here. Graphics 8, location 7, story 1, characters 2. SJW scum 0. See, and then you leave a 0. Okay. I'd argue that that's a review brigade review. The gameplay is all right at best. Not upset by it. It's just a story that really peeves me. How can you go from The Last of Us 1 to this in terms of a story? 3. Awful game ever. No respect for last game. Don't waste your money. 0. Okay, that's an angry review. What the WTF Neil Cuckman and Sony? How dare you do this? 0 out of 10. Okay. But, the idea though is if we could sort, let's see, by user score. This is the thing, right? 10 out of 10. If there are 0 out of 10s, and you're saying that, well, this is a review brigade, how could they have even completed the game? Well, how come you're letting these 10 out of 10s fly by? Because they also haven't finished the game, right? Naughty Dog hit it out of the park. Not better than Last of Us 1, but I can't read the rest of it. 10 out of 10. This is a great game. Game of the year, 10. Okay, well, the best game, without a doubt. All the bad ratings for this game are pure nonsense. It's a shame to have this type of people evaluating this great game without having played it. You couldn't have finished it either, but you left it 10 out of 10. You guys see my point? But, thank God the game journalists are here like Paul Tassi. The Last of Us 2 is getting predictably user score brigaded on Metacritic. Well, we should all have seen this coming. The Last of Us 2 has been out for a few hours, and yet there's already a battle raging over on Metacritic. The game is in the newest battleground for the user scores brigading of a major release, where it has a 3.4 out of 10, as opposed to a 9.5 critical consensus. I like how he puts that, which puts it as one of the top reviewed games of a generation. I'm already seeing this being used as the ammo for the critics are so out of touch with the mainstream audiences. Arguments, but no, that's not what's happening here. Oh, really, Paul? For some context, The Last of Us Part 2 has been out for exactly 7.5 hours in the US and some regions like Australia. It debuted yesterday, but it's a 25 to 30 hour game, so unless people are doing blitz speed runs and immediately going to give Metacritic to give his angry 0 out of 10, these scores are made up of people who are either only a few hours into the game or more than likely have not purchased or played the game at all. Disagree. You don't need to complete the game to the end to be able to review it if it's that bad. Now, if it's unplayable, let's say a game is unplayably bad, am I supposed to complete it all the way to the end in order to validate my review score? I don't think it works that way. If you want to talk about credibility, how about the guy from IGN totally going on Neil Druckmann's timeline to say what an amazing game it was, and all these reviewers giving it a 10 out of 10. Look, if you want to come in here and say it's a great game and it deserves a 92 out of 100, I'll listen. I will listen to that argument. I will listen to that case. But there's no such thing as a 100 out of 100 game. It doesn't exist. Right now, it is half a day into release, and The Last of Us Part 2 has amassed 5,000 user ratings. Scores now it's 10,000. The Last of Us 1 has 9,600 for the entire lifespan. So yeah, something is clearly fishy. Why are people review brigading the game? Likely 3 reasons. Here we go, Paul. The game's prominent use of trans and LGBT. Come on, Paul. Your first idea is that it's just a bunch of homophobes. That's what it is, right? Is that what you're saying? The spoilers for the game that leaked out ahead of the time game were context-free. Many people didn't like the plot turns revealed. That is a really slimy way of saying people don't like the game. So it's getting a negative review because people don't like the game. 3, perhaps some who have played the game the initial hours and don't like the game, albeit scoring it a 0 out of 10 for clunky controls after a few hours seems extreme. I do not recommend you read the user reviews as they are full of spoilers. Oh, right. Only listen to your approved sources of news. I can't say this is an organized campaign because anytime you say that, you get asked to point out the specific organizer, which is rarely possible. But I do know a number of angry gamer YouTuber types that have been ranting about this game since the leaks. Hi, Paul. So I would not be surprised if some of their viewers are among the review brigaders. So you can't prove it, but you're going to insinuate it anyway. Do I think that, yes, everyone must agree that The Last of Us 9 is a 9.5 out of 10 like the critics? No. But you don't want them to look at them. You don't want them to read user reviews. I looked at many of the user reviews and they seem well thought out. Now, there were some junk 0 out of 10, this game stinks, but don't you think people can look at that and know that? Don't you think people can look at a review and know, hey, this person didn't play the game. They're just angry. And by the way, again, these type of shill reviews exist in the 10 out of 10 space too, but every major game journalist, urinalist outlet is now coming to the defense of The Last of Us 2. VG 24/7, The Last of Us Part 2 has already been review brigaded on Metacritic. And again, the critical consensus, the same words Paul Tassi used, for The Last of Us 2 is all around positive, and on Metacritic, the score of 95, but users aren't so happy. It seems the current rating is at 34. Well, it couldn't possibly be because users don't like the game. It couldn't possibly be that access journalism lets only journalists who are likely to give the game a high review access to the game early. Couldn't possibly be that. Now, I'm not saying that everybody reviewing the game negatively is correct, and I'm not saying that everybody who gave it a perfect score is a shill. But the fact of the matter is, if you're paid to review things and you give something a 100 out of 100, I don't believe you. It just doesn't exist. It's going to be interesting to see how this all shakes out, but the reviews are pouring in. How long until Metacritic deletes those scores? We'll have to wait and see. I hope you enjoyed this video. We'll talk to you again real soon.